Hello, Mark Yonley, founder and artistic director of Chicago Tap Theater, back with a brand new episode of the Tea on Tap.
Lace your shoes, ball change for landmark. Yahoo's got the tea on tap. CT Square is where it's at, my love. Nobody near us to see us or hear us. No friends or relations or weekend vacations. We won't have it known, dear, that we own a telephone, my dear.
Today I am so excited to welcome Karida Griffith. That is a name you have probably seen quite a bit recently, especially if you are a tap dancer or tap educator. She has been really responding to the moment that we are in such a remarkable way. She's one of the people who has created webinars and now a 6-week course dedicated to dealing with issues surrounding racial justice, dance, the education of dance, how to talk to your students about race and dance. A lot of really important, very, very timely issues, and Karida is facing them head on and really guiding, I would say, shining a light for the rest of the tap community to pay attention to and follow. It's really important things that she's talking about. So I see that she is here. She will be in the room in a hot second. Until then, I just want to say thank you all for joining us, and a special hi to my mom. Here we go. It's going to take about 3 seconds here, and she will be here. Yay!
Hello. I'm
Hello, how are you?
untangling earbuds.
No worries.
I'm
That's
like
a project.
I need AirPod commercial, but I have small children. So it's like, where would they be? I don't know where they would be. So, but I can
I have to tell you, meeting your children yesterday was such a supreme pleasure. I really appreciated that.
You might meet them again. You never know. They might just.
I love it. Well, it would be a treat for me to do so.
Clearly, they got a hold of these. Let me see if we're okay without it. Maybe we're fine without them. Can you hear me?
Well,
okay?
you let me know.
Can you hear me?
And if I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. Okay, then we don't need them. Sorry, I'm used to them.
I totally get it. I've never tried those on my interviews or Zoom teaching or anything. I've always relied on the microphone on the device, and I've wondered if I wouldn't get better results using AirPods or something like that.
Sometimes it's better to have a little something right there. So I get used to it with Zoom and stuff. And my computer's old, so my mic ain't background.
Believe me, I understand that. Well, I have to say that first off, I just want to thank you for joining us. I'm really excited for this. I think I'm up to about 30 interviews. And the vast majority are people that I've met. They might be mentors of mine, people I've worked with. And there's been just a very special few who I've known by reputation. I know by the work they've done, the friends we have in common, but I haven't yet had the pleasure of meeting them in person. And to me, those interviews are extra special because it gives me an opportunity to get to know somebody even better. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Such a pleasure. I always start these the same. I always say, would you mind kind of telling our viewers where you are? If you're comfortable, give them a little view around your pad, and then we'll go from there. You don't have to, though. I know a lot of people aren't prepared for that. No, and believe me, with 2 kids, I can imagine.
I'm in Portland, and I have 2 small children. I have a stepdaughter that's an adult, and I have 2 small children, 2 daughters that are 2 and 4. And this is my hideaway that I'm in right now, at the back of the garage. When we got this place, at the back of the garage, it's like a workroom. And I saw it and I said, dibs. Yeah. And so now, thanks to my father and my husband, it's now my office / sometimes I teach in here. So wait, I can actually maybe show you. I'm like, there's some floor back there.
Nice.
I'm like, there's some of my flooring.
I love it. And do you have a mug with you? Do you have a drink?
I left it inside.
That is okay.
I have
That
a
is okay. You
dented Contigo. Any dance teachers, y'all, I'm like, I have a dented Contigo. I have two actually, because that is how I could maintain my tea without spilling it on people. I have great mugs. I have a Michelle Obama mug that I really like that says
nice.
excellence from the start from when she was touring around with her book. And I have actually an old Rockettes mug that
Love
is
it.
broken, that has the handle like back on it. So those are my favorites, when I can actually have a mug,
Yeah.
which is in here, usually in my office when they're not in here and they're gonna like knock something down. So
I
that's what
love it. Are you a Portland native?
I am. I am.
You know, I was very lucky. I went to the Portland Tap Festival, I think 4 years in a row. My mom, who's watching, was very kind, and she would fly me to Portland every summer to go study. And she ended up, like, my mom knew Coles and Adkins by name and took a photo of them that ended up becoming part of the Portland Tap Festival, like advertisements. And but I had such fond memories of Portland. What a beautiful, lovely city.
Yeah. It's very popular in the
And
news right now. It's
well, yes.
very popular in the news right now.
Indeed. Who would have thought? So I always start by asking the same thing, which is, tell us a little bit about your first experiences with tap dance.
My very first experiences with tap dance were at Miss Broadwell's dance studio at a little spot which is now a Subway sandwich place. And I was 3 and I took tap, ballet, and baton. That's what the combo classes were in that day. Show my age. I'm like, that's what it was back in that day. It was tap, ballet, and baton. And the tap dancing was like song and dance, so like you learned a little song, you did a little dance, a little song, did a little dance. So that was the first of it. And then when she retired, I moved to a different studio in town with Sally Mack, Sally Mack School of Dance. So that's actually where the festival was back in the day. They
Yeah.
came to us at Sally's studio, and she's very much like, matriarch of the Portland tap community. So many people were either directly trained by her or by one of her students, Terry Brock, who was in Jazz Tap Ensemble. Yes, it was one of her students. She's, we're generationally different, but I remember as a kid, she was like teaching adult classes for Sally, and she taught at the Performing Arts High School here. And so, people like Tony Lupe or, other people around here that, have strong tap programs, a lot of them came through Sally one way or another. So.
Oh, I love that. That's great. I find so many kind of mid-sized cities, it so often is that one figure that really brings a community together and touches so many dancers.
Yeah.
So who were your primary teachers? And you talked a little bit about when you were younger. As you continued your journey through tap into high school and then college, who were your primary teachers? And if you know, who were their teachers?
When I moved to New York, I first was at University of Oregon, and then I switched to NYU. I got a business degree at NYU, but my grades weren't very good because I was always at Broadway Dance Center. So it was more like my backup plan was the business degree, and that was kind of what I negotiated to have my parents be okay with me moving to New York. They knew I wanted to dance, but I had to do some kind of a degree that they understood. They understood a business degree, so that's what we went with. And so my first class in New York was with Bakari Wilder. And so I trained, with Bakari for a while. Gosh, I don't know how long. And then one day he was teaching, he's a philosophical guy, and he's like teaching, and he turns around, he's like, I hope you're not just taking my class. And I was only taking his class. And so he's like, you should be learning from other people. And then he turned around and he continued. And so I was like, I literally went and got the BDC schedule and was like, who else could I be taking from? And so I looked up and I saw Jason Samuels Smith's class was twice a week, and I was like, I'm going to do that. I was very much in love with noise funk and everything that was going on around that. And so I wanted to be around those guys. And so that was very formative for me to be around them. Yeah.
That's beautiful. You know, when I interviewed, I've interviewed both Ayadelli and Bakari on this show. And of course, Ayadelli talks about the role that Bakari played in her development.
Yeah.
I feel like he's one of those figures that if we really traced a lot of people's lineage, he would be a central figure to many of the kind of tap figures working right now. So I really,
yeah.
What a pleasure interviewing him, by the way. He was another person that I didn't know very well, but just,
yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful individual.
One of the special ones.
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Is there anything that one of your teachers or mentors said to you over the years that has really stuck with you that you find yourself repeating either to yourself or to your own students now?
Well, Jason's funny because Jason would say, you know, any questions? And if it was crickets, then he would look at me or somebody, he'd be like, 5, 6, and like count you in.
That's beautiful.
You must have it.
I love it.
Have it. And so
yes.
You better have some questions. Like, or else it's like a one at a time show. Like, and so it was like, oh, do I have any questions? Like, you know, so I use that with my students to help them to figure out what it is that they need. You know, it's like, so I say that and I say, and I'll qualify it. So I won't always do what Jason did, just like count you in. But I'll qualify it and say, like, if you don't have questions, that must mean that you're killing it. That must mean that you have it and you're ready to do it one at a time. So if you don't, then raise your hand and let me know what you need. Do you have any questions or do you need more reps? And so they get to figure out, like, I just need to do it some more times. Or I need, like, and they can start to figure out what it is that they need to get to that point. But having that expectation of, like, you should be able to do this by yourself, you know. And I've heard those stories about, like, noise funk rehearsals and stuff, you know, where, you know, like, that's, like, part of the standard.
Yeah.
You know, so.
I love it. What is it? You know, there's so many different facets of tap dance that I feel like so many of us love. What was it that really hooked you in the beginning?
I don't know if I could articulate it. It just, I think it's where I felt comfortable. Like when I had a chance, because I went to a school where we did a little dance competition and we did that kind of stuff. And the second I had a chance to do a solo, I wanted tap. Yeah. You know, and I'm like, why did I want tap? I can't say. You know what I mean? Like, but I was 11. And I knew that's what I was drawn to. I knew that's what I wanted. So hang on, let me just plug in this thing. Yeah, I knew that's what I wanted. And I knew, like, I loved all the things that we did, but that just spoke to me the
just a tiny bit of, there we go.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
Love it.
Yeah. So it just is what always drew me. And then, so then I don't know if you know this. So then what happened was when I was 18, I was at University of Oregon. My dance partner and I had both gone down there, Kamaria, and within a week we got a call to do the European tour of Black and Blue, and because Diane had been through here. And the cast was short 2 girls. And Diane said, there's 2 girls in Portland because she had been through from the festival. And so I got to jump in with that, right?
That's
like, so
cool.
So all of a sudden within a week, I'd gone down there. I was there for a week. we packed up, and by the next week, so like down there, week 1, then week 2, I'm back here going to New York, like, hurry up, getting a passport. And I'm in rehearsals for, a week with Henry Latang, and Jermaine Goodson was, dance captaining, and Dormisha was in the ensemble, and Bunny Briggs was on the cast. I mean, like it was just this
Wow.
immersion, that I hadn't had before. And so that obviously took it to another level, just to another level. So
I can only imagine. I can only imagine.
I got the bug. So.
And I bet you were probably never in better shape than working with Henry, because I remember when I would take class with him, I don't know if I ever ran a dance as many times as I have in his class, because you do it once and right away, again.
Yes, it was like, you ready to sweat? Like, that's what Michelle Cole, like, I sat down next to Michelle Cole, she's like, you ready to sweat? Everybody was like, for
yes.
And it was that. It was definitely that.
I love it. So I'm particularly interested to ask you this question because, I know that you have spent so much time developing a pedagogical approach to tap dance. And one of the things that I'm always fascinated by is how different tap dancers define the word technique. And I love the fact that in tap, it is a bigger word, I feel like, and it's a little more open to individual interpretation, which I think is an accurate representation of our art form.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious, how do you choose to interpret the word technique, or how do you apply that word?
That's funny because most of my work, what I really set out to do with the pedagogy stuff that I put together was to work with studio teachers, because there's so many studio teachers that are not connected. So hold on, I think you froze a little bit. Did I freeze or did you freeze?
You froze a tiny bit, but I still hear you clear as a bell.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I still.
Okay. So when I'm talking with studio teachers, and when I was listening to studio teachers, I realized that they had a lot of trouble articulating what advanced means. And this, I mean, I've heard other people talk about that as well, but like, what does it mean to be advanced? And so when you're in studio settings where, and I've been in those settings where, there's parents that are like, my kid has their wings, they can do the time steps, why aren't they in the advanced class? And so it's like, well, here's all the reasons. And the problem that we have is that I think so many studio teachers leave this vacuum open, and we don't express what we really mean by advanced. There's all these intangibles in our heads that we're thinking about, but we're not articulating. And so then the vacuum is filled by what parents think, you know what I mean? But they're coming to us for our expertise, so it's a little bit of a weird thing. And then I think sometimes in class, there are definitely studio teachers who make the mistake of only incentivizing the tricks. Right? They know the kids like them, and then getting really excited when the kid gets their wings or gets their pullbacks or gets those things, but don't get excited when they really start to learn how to sit in a swing pocket. They don't get excited by that music. You don't get excited by beautiful triplet. You don't get excited by, you know what I mean? Those things in the same way, that everybody's on the tempo. Like, and so what I've tried to do is, look at, of course, the physical technique components, the differences between rudiment work and, shuffles and flaps and, and those kind of things, but also look, more broadly at musicality, and what that looks like, what that feels like for students as they're growing. Are they aware of tempo when they start dancing, or do they start and then go, whoa, this is faster than I thought? Like, and then they like wave their way into it. But a lot of that has to do with teacher habits. And so if we are setting that standard, that we can't let it continue with that, or we're just going to let them find their way in, then they're just going to find their way in like that all the time. And so trying to continue to expand that and do for what I didn't have. I didn't have a lot of improv growing up. I didn't have any improv growing up. And so that's been such a challenge for me as a dancer, and trying to give more of that to students so that they have a comfort level that I, have struggled so often to have. And so that giving them the tools, not to just have the technique, but then use the technique to express themselves. Like one time I was with my daughter, Naya, she was about 2.5, and we were looking at books and little phonetic books, and it was like words that start with the letter Q. And then, oh, no. First, we had this book about Michelle Obama, actually, this little book that my mom had gotten us. And it was saying things like, being generous, being this, like just qualities, for kids. And one of the words was elegant. And so when she learns a new word, she whispers it under her breath a bunch of times. She still does it. So she was under her breath going, elegant, until she felt like she had it. And I was like, okay. And so she's looking at, and next to it was a drawing of the First Lady in her inaugural gown. And so it's like, and so she just looked at it and was like, okay. And then the next day we had the phonetic books with, and we had words that start with the letter Q. And there was a queen in it, and it was like a British monarch, and, with the scepter and the thing. And she said, Mommy, the queen is elegant. And I did that. I was like, well, hot dang, like she understood the word. She understood it well enough to use it in her own context to express herself. And that's something, and that's so much of what improv is. And so now had she held up this paper is elegant, you'd be like, okay. You know what I mean?
Like, not quite there.
Yeah. So, but the fact that she used it in a context, like that she could use it to express herself, really meant something to me, and that's what made it more impressive. And so one of the things that I've tried to implement as an educator is to give students that gift, and to leave space in my classes, even if it's literally a couple minutes, to see if they're grasping things well enough to use it for themselves. Like if I say, we're gonna do 4 bars, and kid panics and starts to do some time steps, and they don't fit the music, like the way that they're putting the time steps in, I'm like, okay, they don't understand them. Do you know what I mean? Like it tells me that there's a limit to their understanding. And so it's like, okay, going back to the time steps and working with them. And so I just tried to develop a pedagogy that's not a rigid, the list of steps and the things, but here are some things that are going to set your students up to be able to learn faster, dance with musicality, understand tempo, understand basic rhythm patterns, help them and the teachers to have a better understanding of syncopation. A lot of teachers really struggle with syncopation. So the students struggle with more complex rhythms. And so when there's an absence of more complex rhythms, then we need more tricks. We need more trick steps. Right. And so, but we're missing out on the juiciness of the music.
Yeah. The things that we get excited about.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like, if we're going to try and, that's the, if we're like, what makes tap dance stand out? It's like, it's creating rhythm and music. Like, that's the thing. And so if you're trying to compete with Alice the cone turns and, all these things from other styles, aerials and whatnot, trying to use those tools in tap dance is what sometimes people fall into that trap of, like, okay, I just got to make it big.
Right.
It's like, if you make it musical, like, you can get an audience to lean into you. You know what I mean? Like, if you
without a doubt
do that, and people love it. I mean, people sell out. I mean, there's all kinds of tap dancers that sell out houses because they get an audience to lean in on simple stuff.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely, tap pedagogy is something I'm super passionate about, and Thelma Goldberg and I have been discussing trying to create a tap festival, if you will, strictly centered on the educational side of tap, and really having it be more for teachers. And I definitely, we've been talking through who we'd like to have kind of be part of the faculty of that. I really hope that you'll consider being a part of that when we get to it, because I would love to have your voice in the room, because I really, I'm kind of jumping ahead to what we're going to talk about later, but I'm doing your course right now, and absolutely loving it. I think the way you lay out information, it's just very clear. Anyway, so I'm having a great time. So we're going to talk about that later. But so I love that you are so centered in pedagogy. I just think that is so important. And I think historically, it hasn't necessarily been. There's a weird thing with pedagogy and TAP history, which I'm sure we could go on a whole other tangent, right? Because I think the greatest practitioners were not people who in any way, shape, or form thought of themselves as teachers in a traditional sense.
Yeah.
I think they were very much in like a Siddharthic sense or a Buddhist sense. They were very much teachers. But having the privilege of knowing Jimmy Slide, I've been in a room when Jimmy was actually agreed to teach a traditional class. And it was a very interesting experience, and to me, nowhere near as valuable as hanging out with him, listening to him tell stories and talk. And at the same time, of course, then the people that actually did codify it and teach it in a very organized manner, it often was kind of lacking a certain essence of the art form. So, yeah, you and I could just talk about that for hours. So I'm going to move on. I want to talk about you. I want to talk about your resume. I love that you were a Rockette.
I'm going to be right back.
Do it. Go right ahead.
I'm plugged into this thing, but I'm not confident that it's working. And so now I'm worried that we're going to cut off. So give me 1 second. I'm like,
don't worry about it.
Hold on.
Go do it. So while we wait, I just want to say hi to all the people. Bakari, I saw that you joined us. I want to thank you. Bakari, if you go back in time to the beginning of this interview, which I hope you do, you'll see that we were talking about you. We had some really lovely things to say about you. Bakari's on here, so I was telling him he should go back to the beginning of the interview. Okay, so, yes.
Like,
so I love the fact that
charging. I'm like, what if it's not charging, and then it's just gonna cut off?
I know, right? That's the worst.
It takes for your phone to come back on, and like just like a little bit disaster. So I was like, we'll just take 45 minutes of awkwardness or seconds of awkwardness. All right.
So I wanted to talk to you about being a Rockette.
Okay.
Mainly because of course, I've been teaching now for 30 some years, and I don't know if you know, but I founded the Rhythm Tap program at Oklahoma City University.
Oh.
And OCU turns out a ton of Rockettes. So I've seen the show. When it came to town, I had a couple students. They give me tickets, and I thought, it was a super fun show. But that is the dream job for so many young dancers. So I would love if you I feel like the young dancers that watch this would love to hear how you got that job and kind of your experience doing it.
I didn't think of being a Rockette. I will say that. Okay, so back in the day, Savion used to teach a master class at Broadway Dance Center, and you had to have, and they capped it at 100 people, right? And so now this is pre, fancy internet days, so you couldn't just sign in online for the class. So you had to go and sign up. And even if you showed up 30 minutes before class, it would potentially be sold out and you wouldn't be able to get into the class. And so what I would do is I would go from NYU. I would go up in the morning if I knew he was teaching. I would go up in the morning and then sign in and then go back and go about my day so that I'd have my spot when I figured that out. But before I figured that out, I was like the sad puppy dog, outside the class, I can't take class. And so there was a woman there named Barbara who worked at Broadway Dance Center. And she would sometimes slip me into the back of the class, before I figured out the hustle, right? So she'd be so I was sad person, I can't get, so she would sneak me in sometimes. And so I would see her from time to time around Broadway Dance Center. And one day she said, more than once, she said, "You'd be a great Rockette." I said, "Okay." And I proceeded about to go to Bakari's class, Jason's class, whatever I was going there to do. And she said multiple times. And then finally she said, "I spoke with someone at Rockettes about you and expect a phone call about a workshop and a whole thing." And I was like, okay. And so I got a call from a woman named Lynn Sullivan, who was longtime Heritage Rockette. Her mother was a Rockette. And she was a part of an initiative that they were doing to get more women of color into the line. And so they had a workshop, a special workshop for women of color to try out the style with Lynn and work with her. And it felt really normal, bizarrely, initially, I'll say. It felt very normal. It felt like the choreography style, because my teacher, Sally, our choreography was Al Jarreau, it was Liza Minnelli. Like like our tap choreography was, we ran the gamut. Like we did chorus line, we did, Herb Alpert. I mean, like we ran a gamut with stuff that we did. So I felt like it was just like the Liza Minnelli stuff we used to do when I was little, like a little shine it on, a little this and that. So I was like, oh, this feels normal, so the audition was the next week and they hired me. It was a year of a lot of turnover. Some years they don't have that. And when they have less casts and stuff, they don't have that. I happened to come in at a time when they were doing a big turnover, where there was like different contract things that happened and stuff. And they were looking to diversify the cast. And so they were looking for women of color who felt comfortable with all the style, the tap, the jazz, all of that stuff. And so they sent me to Detroit my first 2 years. And then after that, I was in New York. I was not as comfortable once we got into rehearsals because there's a lot to learn. In that, the level of sharpness was I had to step up my sharpness a bit. And then getting into the notion for Rockettes, the branding is so like, you're the same. And if you're standing out for some reason, if you're doing a little extra something, you're not supposed to do that. I got in trouble for a tin pop that I kept adding into this little part. I was giving a little something extra. And the dance captain had to come to me and she's like, it's really cute, but you can't keep it. Like, she's like, you're killing it, but you can't keep it. I was living my best life with that tin pop, but you couldn't have it. So, because the uniformity of the thing, I had never heard like, you're standing out, and so we need to fix that. Like, like that, and that's the way that, especially Linda Haberman's choreography, there wasn't a lot of room for, like, everything had to be tight, like super, super tight, super, super precise. And then you have to learn the staging on top of it. So there's all these number lines, there's numbers across the stage, and there's dots and lines. And so you have to know for every step, my right foot's on number 8 with my toes on the white dotted line. And then I move over. This step is supposed to move 6 numbers to the left, 4 numbers to the right, 6 numbers to the left, 4 numbers to the right. So the first few days they're giving us all the choreography. So we're getting all the choreography and then there was props in the show. There was a bunch of props. And so it was like trying to like not drop this solid wood candy cane like this, and like make this, it wasn't styrofoam. I was like, could they make this styrofoam? Like, it was so like, to make it sharp, you have like, I had one really big bicep by the end of the first season because it was more in the right hand. So I felt like I was like really imbalanced, but you had to do all these props. There was a big wreath and the toy box and so it was, we were taking the props home. They would let us take the new girls, they would let us take the props home to practice, like with the props and like, and then they give you the number lines. They give you all that. And then so you're like, at some point everybody cries, like
I can imagine.
I was just the overwhelm. Like, but I still remember the dance captain yelling at us, up 6, back 4, like up 6, back 4. Like, and I'm trying to still remember this, like, what's the step, like the arms, the thing, like, and then you're supposed to be getting your number line and your dots and like all the things. I held it together until they were like, thank you, that's it for today. And I was like just because it's just overwhelming. It's literally like a football playbook for sports people. It's like a football playbook full of staging details, let alone the choreography and all of that. Then once you get it, like once you're in the universe, you get how the universe works. And so the second year, third, like you're just like, oh, okay, I'm left on. Okay, all right, I just got to write it down, and then you'll like get it together. But it's a lot to take in at first. It's a very rigorous audition process. It's a couple of days. It's several rounds because there's so many people that show up. So it's intense, and the tap dancing is more, people underestimate it. It's a big reason why a lot of people get cut, because their tap dancing isn't, their technique isn't strong enough. And, even though obviously with Rockettes there's a lot of arms and there's leg lines and blah blah blah, but okay, I've been to auditions where the choreographer just wasn't very good, like for musical stuff. Their technique was, like you're like, okay, like like you're trying to get past it, you're like, okay, don't want this job, like, okay, like the choreographer is unclear about timing, not like technique isn't that great, and the Horace Turnbull did the choreography for 12 Days. I don't know if you know who Horace Turnbull is, but he's a longtime teacher at Broadway Dance Center, and so the footwork has integrity, like it had, the musicality, there's integrity to it. When you add the arms, simple things feel impossible. Like literally the theme step for the 12 Days of Christmas number is flap heel, step shuffle, half step, step shuffle, change step, bevel. That's it. Right? You learn that, like as soon as you say it, you're like, got it, okay. But then they put the arms on it, and when they're supposed to switch, and when they're supposed to and then it was like 30 minutes later, I'm like, I don't have it, but the footwork, the footwork 100% has integrity, and there's points where, it's like people, they don't have quality shuffles, they can't maintain a triplet through combinations, they can't, it's at Radio City now, there's more miking of the dancers, so it's like down the leg line, like down the tights, like you're mic'd up, there's no track, there's no, so there's more integrity to what's expected. And so I have a friend who coaches people, Rhonda, she coaches people who want to be Rockettes, and she spends a lot of time on tap technique. She's like, so many people's tap technique is so bad and they won't make it because of that.
That's awesome. I'm happy to hear that, and I think that's an important message for any young people out there watching. That I always, it amazes me these kids that say they want to go to New York and be on Broadway, and they drop tap when they're 13 years old, and I'm just like, wow, well, you don't really quite okay.
And it's the work is simple, but you'd be amazed at how many people struggle with simple. And that's one of the reasons why I started the training program I did, because so many teachers, they get into this thinking of like, oh, my kids just need the basics, like they don't need, but then they underestimate what the basics are, or the execution isn't there, and not just like I've taught them the list of things that make up a time step, but not anything else around it. And so then, there's these people that come to New York, and they feel very confident going to an audition that has tap, and they feel like they've been tap dancing for 10 years, but their training's been shortchanged. So they can't, and they're like, why am I not making it through these cuts? Why am I not making through these cuts? And it's like, well, it's like, those shuffles aren't going to get you through cuts, and it's like, there's shuffles and there's shuffles. And so it's stuff that, those of us that are very connected to the tap community take for granted. But there's so many people outside of that world that aren't connected to that and miss that. And so they're making a lot of mistakes, not purposefully, but just making a lot of mistakes when it comes to understanding what they need to do in terms of quality of technique and just the basics. That's a big, there's a lot of basics, you know, and I think sometimes there's teachers who quite honestly try to bring the level down to their skill set instead of continuing to do their professional development to expand their skill set to meet standards. And some of them don't get the feedback from New York, from these places that say like the tap technique that's coming is not good. You know what I mean? Like, and so that's something that I've tried to do for studio teachers, is to let them know that because I taught at Broadway Dance Center, because I was in Rockettes, like because I was, you know, like I've done these different things. I can tell you confidently that I've been in rooms where hop shuffle, hop shuffle, hop shuffle, hop shuffle, hop shuffle, hop shuffle, where 95% of the people in the room couldn't do that in a quality way. And they're not all from Iowa. You know, like, oh, these kids from Iowa are just, you know, terrible. Like, you know, it's like they're, you know, from everywhere who are missing this basic technique, and teachers aren't getting that kind of feedback. They go to competitions thinking they're going to get some decent feedback, and they don't. And so it's like, where are the teachers getting any kind of feedback? You know, so it's, I think a service, it's like to try to continue to challenge studio teachers to expand themselves instead of bring the level down to everything they learned up to the point that they were 16 and all of a sudden now they're teachers, you know, because that's what happens a lot.
Yes. Well, I am the choir, and I love what you're preaching because I am with you. I agree completely. So I'm gonna jump through a little bit because I do want to make sure we get some of these kind of weightier topics before we run out of time. And I do want to make sure that also we talk about what you're kind of investigating right now and offering right now, because I think it is so valuable and so important that if we finish this interview and don't discuss it, I would feel terrible. I would really feel like I did our listeners a disservice. So just to get into this a little bit, first off, I do want to mention that you teach at Pace University, correct?
Not that I used to.
Okay. I'm always, you know, I have students ask me all the time where they can send their kids to college to study tap dance. And, you know, I selfishly hope that one of the outcomes of this moment that we find ourselves in is that American universities, American dance studios across the country really embrace this idea of decentering European dance and recenter Black and American dance within their programs. Are there universities that you recommend to students? Because I know that there are parents that are looking right now. They're thinking about 2021. They have seniors in high school, and they're going, gee, where the heck am I going to send my daughter who loves tap dance more than anything else? Where can I send her where she's not just going to be doing ballet and modern 7 days or 5 days a week? Because I have two recommendations that I generally give, and that's a shame.
Honestly, Pace has kept quality educators. They've really worked to keep quality educators in their program, bring in quality choreographers, to push the students. And Pace attracts a lot of strong tap dancers. Pace, I can tell you, is a program that when they have a high school like intensive where they're looking at prospective students, I've been a part of like running the tap part of that, and had one of the directors come over to me and say, take a look at this girl, take a look at this girl, take a look at this girl. We weren't thinking about admitting them. It's a small program. We weren't thinking about admitting them until we saw them tap dance.
I love to hear that.
I was like, I don't know a lot of programs saying that, but saying that
her
skills could take her from being waitlisted to being in.
Amazing. I love it.
So I'm like, I'm a big advocate for that. Like, I know the directors there, and I know that they're working to continue to, continue to adjust the program. It's already a ballet jazz program. It's not a ballet modern program. You have to take tap, you have to take hip hop. They're looking at adding some more history. The challenge with any university that I see is that there's these credit limitations. Right. And so it's like, how many credits of this, how many credits of this? there's only like 2 credits required, I think, for tap at Pace, and like maybe 1 or 2 credits of hip hop. But they've upped the level, like now, where they have an incoming freshman class that's more of an advanced tap class, and then there's people who've never taken tap who, they'll let in some people like that too who've never taken tap, and they'll work with them as well. But now they've split up the levels to now where they had a legit advanced class straight out of the gate, and where those students that had been putting in work weren't in a room with intermediate dancers like going, okay, I have to take this for credit, but they're not getting anything. Not that they're not getting anything out of it, but they're certainly not pushed with it.
Yeah.
So I have some students that are looking not just at the schools, but at the cities.
Yeah.
So whatever they want to study, because there's also cost involved. Pace is expensive. I mean, like they don't take a lot of people. There's several places where, people went to Marymount, like, Jared Grimes and DeWitt, they went to Marymount, and I think they studied theater, but it's like, but you're in New York, so that means that you can connect up. I went to NYU, I studied business, but I was a Broadway dancer all the time. There's people that could go and study dance in Chicago and maybe find a school that does a lot of other things, but could be with Chicago tap community, could be, could study with Brill. I have a student that's been seriously considering that. It's like, maybe I'll go to Chicago, and that way I could be like with Mad Rhythms, and I could also be at this thing, and it's like finding the fits. But then I think while still continuing to ask universities, what's your tap program? What's your hip hop program? Because so that they are getting the awareness that maybe they're not as competitive if they don't have those things.
Yeah.
Like I've said that about dance competitions, for example, like even if you know you're going to go to the comp, like you don't have a choice. You're at a studio where they're like, we're going to this one. And in the past, they've had really poor adjudication for tap or for hip hop, because hip hop adjudication is also really poor. Call them in advance and ask them, who are your tap judges? Like, what are their backgrounds? What's the flooring situation? Is it like, what's the miking situation? Like, and at like all of these different things, they're like, I'm considering coming, we're considering, but just to keep putting it in front of them beforehand. So it's not just complaint after, or, you're there and you're, like that, like that, but like in advance. So while they're courting people for business, like we, to say, oh, okay, like we need to make sure we have these things. People keep asking us about tap judges. People keep asking us about hip hop judges, or whatever it is, so that they start to think it's going to be in my interest as a business owner to step up and meet that demand. But if we don't communicate it, then they don't know. And so with universities, maybe it's the same thing, that still saying like, what are you doing about decolonizing your dance program? And, even if you don't end up going there, but still going around and asking the questions, I think can be a service.
Yeah. I was so excited. One of the universities that I've been affiliated with for a long time is Hope College. And they just added Heather Cornell to their faculty this year, which I thought was a real statement on their part. They really, Matt Farmer, the head of that department, he is a huge believer in tap dance and the importance of it. And he wanted to hire somebody that would make a statement about their seriousness in approaching tap dance as an art form. So I thought that was really an exciting development. I was really happy to see that happen. So I'm gonna, and I apologize, I'm gonna be reading these questions a little bit because I want to make sure I really like say these things clearly. Okay. So in the past 4 months, your voice has become a critically important voice. And I'll tell you, I had certainly been aware of you through, again, I've known Michelle for a year, I knew Michelle from the St. Louis Tap Festival days, back when we were both teenagers and she was a gangly, and we have so many friends in common. So I certainly knew who you were, but, when everything came into focus at the end of May, when I think our, society was so confronted with the ugliness of our history and how it was playing out through our present, that finally everybody, I think, finally had enough and started to really get engaged in a way that we hadn't seen. Right away, as a tap dancer, I think my thoughts were, what does this mean for tap dance? How's this going to change things? How should it change things? How can I look at what I'm doing as a tap dancer to try to play a role in making positive change? And I definitely was looking for guidance, and I feel like myself, along with many people, I really think that your voice was a really important voice, and you were there when we needed you. Because I think there were certainly a lot of things that we had heard articulated in different ways as tap dancers in the past 30, 40 years. But I think it had always been, you'd hear this from somebody, you'd hear that from somebody, and I think we needed somebody to kind of synthesize it and bring it together and say, okay, let's really sit down, let's have a real heart-to-heart. And so, first off, I want to say thank you. It really, I was just talking to, that Brill and I had lunch yesterday, and he and I were just talking about this yesterday. I'm trying so hard, especially because I do teach kids, to focus on the positive outcome that we're going to see of this moment, rather than the sheer, you feel like you're making progress and then you see Kenosha, and it just breaks your heart all over again. So this is such important work, and I know just how much the dance community needed this opportunity to learn and expand their knowledge and skill set. I'm curious, when and how did you realize that you had a unique chance to be an agent for good, that you had the training, the experience, the knowledge, and how have you, I have to ask, as a teacher, how did you pull all this content together so quickly? Because it is really impressive. I'm doing this course, and I marvel at both the quality and volume of content that you have out there. Could you talk about that a little bit? I know I asked two very different questions.
Sure. So when I guess first thing I'll say is I grew up in a house where Dr. King's speeches were on a record player.
Mm.
And I have a father who, in my head, he's asleep with a book on his chest. Like that's just, he learned how to read as an adult. My father did.
Oh, wow.
And hasn't stopped, won't stop, right? Mm. And when I was about 17, I met a woman named Joy DeGrew through her daughter. We became best friends in high school, and she became a mentor for me spiritually, and then later on educationally, because her work, her passion and work is facilitating healing in the Black community. Right? And so she eventually authored a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And I started to travel with her a little bit. So between gigs, she needed help. When she would come to New York, she would stay with me. When she would come, she used to be on a show quite a bit in the local New York area called Like It Is with Gil Noble. It's an outstanding weekly local show in New York. And so I just got to sit at her feet, basically, and listen. And there's other mentors that I had in my life that I tried to learn from them, not just what they knew, but the lens of how to look at things with insight. is what I was endeavoring to do whenever I would get to sit with any of, like, I've really been lucky to be around some amazing mentors, and Joy is one of them. And so Joy is not a Dr. Joy, and she's not a historian. She's a social scientist. And so her insight into historical matters was just a lot deeper than this happened this date, this happened this date, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. But looking at human behavior, looking at these other components that go into these stories, like, you know, has been very powerful. And so I've had that knowing and had that been a part of that kind of learning community for, you know, since I was in high school. Even though I never saw myself getting an advanced degree, I was like, I didn't see myself in a university setting. I did end up teaching at Pace, but I didn't see myself in a university setting. So I didn't pursue any advanced degrees. But it was still stuff that I was learning and knew how to kind of get my hands around. And now it's even easier because the information age makes everything, you know, so much easier. But what's not out there is a lot of insight. I think that people, you know, look but don't see. And I think that people's beliefs are so entrenched and hardwired that it's hard to look at new information and take it for what it is, and allow that to influence one's beliefs and one's way of being and functioning in the world, because a lot of it's core shaking stuff. Even for somebody who is Black, I grew up, you know, in a Black family, in a small Black community, but in a Black community, but also in a lot of white spaces. A lot of people, everybody who grew up in a standard educational environment here got a certain amount of education. Most of it was just, you know, it's just information, but it's very limited information. And some of the stuff was just factually wrong. Like, so there's stuff like John Muir was an explorer who he discovered lands where no one had ever lived before. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
And that was in history books until 1980 in Oregon, right? So that's stuff that my brothers read. You know, like, so we all came to, and when we don't have a filter, like our brains don't actually have a filter to go, there were people here before. So what are we saying? Are we saying that they don't matter? Or are we just lying and saying they didn't exist? Which thing are we saying? So many of us got a misinformation, a miseducation about history. And so the information that I learned from Joy was empowering for me as a Black person. I mean, I can say it now when I look at Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk, like the amount of education that's in that story, that's in that show. It's a model of so many different things. Like, I mean, it could be studied, really. Like, it can really be studied. But so anyway, so all of those things, they're just rolling around in there, stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And then everything is happening, you know, with Ahmaud Arbery and, you know, Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and all these things. And I, you know, all of our feeds are a little bit filtered, you know what I mean? Like, but I have a few people on my feed that, you know, get through for various reasons, like, you know, people that, you know, work online or do other things. And so I was able to start seeing these other perspectives about race that are just frighteningly off base. I'll just say it that way. And I was walking around like,
Oh, Karida, I just want to warn you that Instagram cuts us off at an hour. So if we lose contact, I will log right back in. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to interrupt, but I didn't want it to cut you off in the middle and you wonder what happened. So please continue. I apologize.
Okay. So I was just inflamed and thumb warrioring, you know, and I'm like, with, you know, I was like, this is so lame. Like, I need to just say some stuff because there's so much stuff that people don't know, and people are just talking from holding two puzzle pieces and saying, this is the story. Why don't you see that this is the story? Like, if only you would just follow the police officer's instructions, then it would be fine.
Mark Yonley, founder and artistic director of Chicago Tap Theater, back for the second part of our interview with Karida Griffith. It has been a really amazing conversation so far. What a pleasure it has been to get to know Karida a bit better and hear her thoughts. And I see that she is here, so we'll be back on in about 5. And 3, 2, 1. Yay!
Hey, I got my.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
I'm with you. See.
Love it. Love it. Okay, I'm so sorry. Please continue. You know, this hour-long limit is the the pain.
So like I said, I was walking around inflamed. It was just hard. People don't know. People don't know when you've been walking through your life with this stuff, and then it's at these peak moments where it's really hard to process. And it was like, turmeric, I need anti-inflammatory. Like, I was literally just like inflamed, and I was like, okay, like, I need to just say some things. I need to put some historical context out there for people, because people are holding two puzzle pieces, somebody chewed a piece off, like, people are holding 3 chapters of a 7-chapter book and are like, it's all here, like, and like all like, and trying to have these definitive discussions about the way that things should move forward and how things should be, without any, without sufficient information. And so I just was like, all right, like, I'm just gonna have these seminars. So I had one in mind, actually. And so I thought I would just do kind of what Dr. Joy does, what I just watched her do and listened to her do for so long, was just give people a historical context, and then she would get into her work of post-traumatic slave syndrome. So I didn't get into that, but I understood how to paint a picture, that leads up to the minstrelsy, that leads up to why Misty Copeland is the only person, or why she's told, your body isn't right, and we don't know what to do with your hair, and your skin's all wrong. That has historical context that goes all the way back to plantations, where doctors would say that Black skin was just an abnormal foil for normal white skin, and it's our first pathological symptom was our skin color. Like, by doctors would say, well, if this is the first, there's something wrong with us. Okay, job one. Like, that's the first thing that we're going to put out there. But the first thing that's inherently wrong with us is our skin color, and that's how we end up with a race-based version of slavery, the length and depth of which has never existed in human history. So there's been slavery everywhere. There's been all different kinds of slavery, but a form that's based on skin color that, intends to, and by law, dehumanizes the people in it. The fact that it's lifetime, the fact that it's generational, the transatlantic component, like, the level of abuse, the ongoing nature of it, and then to just say free, and then proceed, but then continue to proceed with the race-based policies, obviously, after slavery, makes it a really unique institution of slavery, and so that has led to where we are. And so I did the first seminars, like, I just want to put something out, for the dance community, not just the tap dance community, just, for the dance community, because when you'd be in like Facebook groups, you'd see these bubbling up discussions amongst people in groups. It could be something about the codification of tap dance, like people, having these terminology arguments, and we're like, where are these terminology arguments coming from? And what's this about? And a lot of those things fell along racial lines, and people notice that. You know what I mean? That there's people that are holding a dictionary, and they're usually not Black, with a dictionary of like, this is what, according to this book, that the stamp is this, and like, and saying, how dare you not know this? This is from the DEA. We're like, who's the DEA? Like, we don't, like, like that, you know, that kind of stuff. We're having these discussions about tights or ballet shoes or appropriation. There's somebody going, I'm white. Why don't people take me seriously when I'm a hip hop teacher? And people are like, they're just stupid. They don't know. And it's like going, well, there's precedent for why people are bothered by your presence.
Yeah.
Here's that, you know, and so sometimes I would get into groups and be like, here's the historical backdrop you're standing in front of.
Yeah.
Maybe now you understand why people are looking at you that way. When you change the backdrop, if you put the backdrop behind me of something else, then you view me in a different, you know what I mean? It's like I'm presented in a different way, and you're brushing across bruises, wounds of people's that date back, you know, and literally are in our DNA, epigenetics. Like it's literally in our, like the you know, some of it exists literally in our DNA. And so I talked with Chloe and Maud about it, Arnold, and they helped me put it together in terms of like just getting word out and use their Zoom account, because they had a big Zoom account because they do all the online festivals.
Yep.
And you know, they're you know, Chloe and I and Maud and I go way back to college and all of that, but yeah, so they kind of like gave me a little extra courage when I needed it, and I was like, should I do this? And they're like, do it. And yeah, and so it was like a lot of people showed up. Like it was like closed. It was like locked out at like 1,000 people. The first one that I did, I was like, how are all these? Like I'm looking, I'm like, oh, there'll be a few hundred people. Like that's cool. And then it was like, wait. And so then I'm like panicking. I'm like, oh God. So I was like, this better be good. Okay. Like you know, and so I just did the best I could to compile something, you know, for an hour and 15 presentation. The discussion part went almost 3 hours. And then it was like, okay, now what do I do? Do I do anything else? You know, like it just, so I did another one that went back a little bit farther and looked at the work of Dr. Edwin Nichols, who does axiology, the study of cultural-based value systems. And it's kind of an interesting light on like standardization and codification and how those things have shown up in forms that are not from that European construct. You know, ballet was very, you know, codified very early on. It was very early on a performance art, codified, But you're talking about, you know, something like tap dance that did not come from that, you know, and then now all of a sudden, you know, somebody's making a dictionary. Why are they making a dictionary? Like, why, you know, it's like, why is there, you know, I mean, in England, there's exams for their tap program. It's like exams and like you have to know this combo and like, and I don't think it's like the BS course. Like it's,
No.
like it's, you know, I mean, it's like, okay, great. You got to learn the, you know, the
Sorry, I don't think it was the BS course. Yeah,
like
I know it is funny. We literally, that is one of the things that Brill and I talked about yesterday, was the British system, and what a weird thing to impose upon this art form.
Yes, and even technically, like I've had some people from that go through my training program. Even technically, there's some weird things. You know what I mean? Like some put in this pre-step before the students do a pullback and like, you know, some things that's like, why would you put that at like, you know, right? Miranda's like, I wish it had been the BS course. Right? Like, well, like let's learn these dance, like let's learn Laura, let's learn that, like, yeah,
yes.
it's not that, so
right? Yeah.
It's like, well, where does that come from culturally? Like where, you know, and there's a basis for where that comes from. And so I just tried to give more of that context to what we're looking at in the dance world. And again, where people would be running up and butting heads in these different dance teacher groups about these things that are racially based. They're like, Jennifer Lopez is so gross. You know, look at her halftime performance. And, you know, this person's great and this person's raunchy. And we're like, based on what? You know, like, and just running up against all of these different beliefs and attitudes and things, and having more people, and then one of the things that happened was, you know, the Rockettes, women of color, like got together and formed an alumni group, which has also been, you know, really amazing and really powerful to connect with these other women that, you know, we weren't all in the same cast, you know, we're spread out, like, so
Yeah.
being able to connect with them, and one of the things that I did was I asked a few of them if I could talk to them about their dance experiences growing up, because we all had different dance experiences. Did you grow up in a studio that was all Black? Did you grow up in a studio where you were the only Black child in your classes? Were you affirmed? Were you ignored? Were you denied? Were you like? And so there's all these other experiences and things that I was listening to, and I just kept, and I was combining that in my head with how many teachers that were talking with me about, like, how do you talk to this, you know, how do you talk about this with kids? How do you talk about this with kids? How do you know, should I talk to kids about this? How do I? I'm scared I'm going to do it wrong. You know, like, so I was like, well, I can show you what I do, you know? And so that's what the Roots Rhythm and Dance program is one, to show you what I've done up to this point, because I've been doing in-school residencies and school assemblies where I talk about tap dance history and stuff, so I can share those things, but also my evolution of thought, because I don't pretend to be like I have everything together, and there's plenty of things that I don't know, and I continually myself need to say, like, could I be doing this in a different way? What's another way I could be doing this? And so in the R3 dance program, it's not only stuff that I've used, but then there's a couple things, I don't know if you've looked at this week's materials, Mark, yet, but like there's a couple things I'm like, I haven't tried this yet, but think about this.
Yes. Oh, I'm caught up all the way through end of week 2.
Okay.
So I'm just about to start week 3 materials. Although I have not yet delved into the Q&As, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. So the week 3 is like, okay, so I started with older students, and now it's like we're at middle school, like grades 6 to 8. But really, it's just about, because grade 6 to 8 can handle advanced concepts. You can talk to grade 6 to 8 about cultural appropriation. You can talk to them about, you know, any number of things. But it's about how to, you know, what are the simplest ways to convey concepts, you know, that are more advanced concepts, because they are old enough for that level of critical thinking. But those things are just as equally, they're as useful with adults. Like, you know, it's like I'm saying it's, you know, about grade 6 to 8, but really it's just about, you know, some nuts and bolts ways to communicate concepts in a simple way.
Well, Karida, I know your time is limited, so real quick, I want to jump in and just say a couple things. One, so as I said, I've been teaching over 30 years. Part of I think my approach to education has always been to integrate learning the culture and the history of tap, certainly with the focus on the Black origins of tap and talking about the challenges that were unique to Black artists. Even as somebody who thought they were fairly well educated, you know, I spent time with the Nicholas brothers, and I talked to Honey Coles, and I heard and I absorbed all this. Still, even with that lucky background that I have, I'm finding so much use and good knowledge that you're presenting. So I really want to give a full-throated endorsement. I know it's too late, obviously, for anybody to sign up for this session. Do you think that you might run a second session after this? Will there be another chance?
People are sleeping on the deadline. They're like, can I get in? And I'm like, no, we've already started. So I'll do it again. I'm thinking, I think I could do it again in October.
Awesome.
I think I could do it again in October. So if people are here that want to get like onto my email list or anything, you could go to karidagriffith.com/start. And that's a little starter guide thing that I made for people. It's free. It's like, if you're looking at your dance systems, whether you're in casting or you're a company director or you're, you know, studio teacher, whatever you are, like examining your systems in some different ways if you're looking to create more inclusivity, if you're really looking to make some changes, it's just a way to start looking at it. It's just a starter guide. But if you do that, and if you say like, yeah, send me other things, then I'll have you on the list when I'm letting people know that the next round will go. So what was I going to say about that? The thing that I want to say about that is I'm so glad, Mark, that you brought that up, because I think that in the studio culture, I'll say for sure, like when I've done my in-school residencies, when I've done, assemblies, I'm in a class, with the same kids for 10 sessions or something. I've always led with history, but when I've gone into studios, I would totally like kind of do as the studio did. I would be a little bit like when in Rome, and I would just kind of do it that way. I would teach about individuals, but I didn't integrate as well as I do when I'm in regular schools. And so that's something that I am like, it was like, I've made that mistake. And I think that so many teachers, especially that are afraid or feel like they don't know, are like, oh, well, we just teach dance. Like, we just teach dance. And I'm like, oh, well, we all know that we don't just teach dance, right?
That's right.
We all know we don't just teach dance. We know that most of our students will not be professionals. They're not trying to be professionals. And even from a business standpoint, I was listening to a business coach who helps studio owners, and they were saying, if you just go in and you tell your clients, your potential clients, families, whoever, that you just teach dance, you won't be able to charge what the value of your stuff is. But if you are explaining that you are a character education, character development, program that uses dance as a vehicle, then it gives you, do you know what I mean? Like a different standing, between you and Dolly Dinkle down the road, right? And so it's like, if you all of a sudden now want to hide and say like, oh, we only teach steps here. I'm like, don't, like, no, you don't. And you don't. And, it's something that we're always like, of course we teach life. Of course we, and there's several problems with teaching just steps. I can tell you, I don't think Sally's on Instagram, but like, I can tell you, we learned a lot of steps, and she was very good at teaching us the step. Like, she was very good at teaching us technique. And it obviously, gave me what I needed to get into my career. But when I would get into auditions and I'd be, talking with other dancers that knew who other choreographers were, they'd be like, well, I mean, Jerome Robbins, like his stuff is just this and that. And I'd be like, yeah, like I didn't know. Like I didn't know anything. I didn't know about musicals. I didn't know. I mean, like we didn't learn a lot of tap history. We didn't learn any tap history. Like in my childhood studio. Like, so I like learning. Like when I got to New York, and luckily enough to be around some of the masters who were around when I got there, but also just like, we didn't learn that stuff. And so I was like embarrassed. Like I would just be like, well, yeah, their musicals are always like that. Like I didn't know. We did the musicals, but I didn't know the book. I didn't know who wrote. I didn't know who did the choreography. I couldn't have told you who Bob Fosse was. I'm like, oh, now she might have said it and I wasn't listening that day. But it certainly wasn't done with repetition to where we would get it. Right? And so I was woefully like uninformed.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why would we send our students anywhere? Why would we, raise up future patrons of the arts? Even if that's what it is, that they're going to be people who buy tickets.
Yeah.
Why would we raise them up to know nothing about the creators, about the innovators? Like, why would we do that on purpose? My teacher didn't shortchange us on purpose. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like but now, knowing what we know now, rather than, well, I was always taught, rather than that, like, let's look at 21st century dance education and what it needs to be. You see, like, and so it's like, okay, it needs to be well-rounded. So many of these students are so high anxiety because everything is in these little compartments. Like you go over here, history, you go over here, dance, you go over here, math, you go over here, physics. And like, it all fits. It all fits. Right. And so it's like, we can help merge their worlds and
Yeah.
have their dance experience be so much more enriching, you know, and it will continue to be fun. It will continue to be fun. People are like, we're going to suck the fun out of it by teaching, like, you know, it's like going,
Oh gosh, no, they love it.
when has it ever not been fun? You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
dance, but it's like, but then enriching the experience so that they actually appreciate. And then we're like, oh, these students don't appreciate anything. They think everything's instant. But then we don't want to teach them like the realness of where stuff actually comes from, and that's too much of a burden. It's like, give me a break.
Yeah.
Like if it's like we can give them the information, and that's what the R3 program is about. We can give them the information in ways that they can bear it. I'm not going to give them the 500-pound weight and talk to them
Sure.
about things that J. Marion Sims did to babies. I haven't even done
Right.
that with the adults in this program. Like,
Yeah, that's rough.
you know, it's like I'm not leading with the 500-pound weight.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like, but
I do.
there is information that these students can more than handle.
Yeah.
The same way that they handle the studios doing pieces about bullying, pieces, you know, like pieces about the Holocaust, pieces about death, pieces about 9/11, pieces about prom night date rape. I've seen that on stage. I'm like, this is really happening. You know,
Yeah.
like this. Yeah,
Oh, I do. I've judged before. Yeah, you see things and you think, yeah. You know what? I'll say this, and then I want to make sure to get to rapid risk, because if we don't get those 10 questions or 12 questions down, I'm going to feel heartbroken.
Okay.
I always find in my experience that when I teach kids the culture as well as the dance, I make a point to let them know that by putting on their tap shoes, they are now part of that culture. And I feel like they get a sense of pride out of that, and they better understand their responsibility to know the culture that they're coming from and that they're taking from and borrowing from and being a part of. So I just, man, do I love hearing you talking about this, because I sometimes have felt like I'm in a desert doing all this, talking of, you know, teaching music theory, teaching how to read a time signature and quarter notes and eighth notes, and, you know, as well as then history and major figures. So thank you. All right, I'm going to move into rapid riffs, because I want to make sure I know that you have a hard deadline.
Yes.
These are 12 questions I've asked every single guest on this show. Some of them are hard. I always say this in advance to kind of give people a hard time. I do give these questions in advance. So if any of these are really hard, I don't want to hear any complaining. All right, here we go. Number 1, what tap shoes do you wear?
K360s.
2, taps, tight or just a little bit loose?
What?
The taps on your shoes, do you like them tight or just a little bit loose? Yeah, me too. 3, favorite song, and yes, one song to tap dance to.
Blue Skies.
Lovely. 4, favorite composer.
Oh my goodness. Are you serious? Okay.
I know. Oh, it gets harder.
I'm going to go with Duke Ellington.
Lovely. 5, you're in 4/4 time. Do you count in 4s or 8s?
Both. I confuse my students.
You are not the first one to say that. 6, favorite tap dancer to watch who is no longer with us.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Jenny Lagan and Jimmy Slide.
Love it. 7. Oh, if that was hard for you, you're going to hate this. Favorite living tap dancer to watch.
Dormisha. That's not hard.
Love it. 8. Favorite, yeah, that's a great choice. She is, you know what? I've been in this community my entire life. I've known Dormisha since St. Louis in the 90s, I feel like. I still get a little fanboy around, I still get a little tongue-tied. I was on faculty with her 3 years ago, and she is
it's like
unbelievable.
backstage during Blues Project, it's just like everybody gather around.
Yeah, gorgeous.
Yeah.
8, favorite choreographed tap piece you've ever seen or done.
Favorite choreographed tap piece that I've ever seen or done. Whoa. Oh my goodness. One is boom.
Mm.
I'll stick with that one. I won't belabor it. Yeah, boom is one of them. Gregory.
Love it. What single tap performance that you've seen in person do you remember the most vividly?
Noise funk.
You can go back in time and see any one tap performer or tap performance. What do you see?
My gut said John Bubbles, Sport and Life.
Ooh, nice. What tap dance would you most like to see added to the tap canon?
Oh.
It's like, what tap dance should all of us learn? Just like we all know Laura, we all know Opus One.
Oh.
What should be added to that?
Whoa.
Also, hi, Sarah.
Black Man Shuffle from Blues Project, choreographed by Derek Grant and Dormisha.
Love it. Finally, second step of the Shim Sham. What count do you start it on?
I was there in LA when he was like, it starts on the one. On stage, and it was like, oh. I still am. And yeah.
Yep. I know. I was lucky enough also to take from Leonard Reed. I'm not going to lie. I do not start it on the one. I just can't. My body just doesn't want to do it.
Just
so
in my head.
So I want to
get into that song. I'm like, I have to. Yeah. Now it's a nice counterpoint that happens on big stages because there's somebody doing a little of everything. So maybe
yes,
where it's supposed
yes. Karida, before I say my final goodbye to you, I have a little housekeeping I have to do. I want to thank Leah Koch, our marketing director and tech guru. I want to thank our staff, Molly, Allie, Sarah, my beautiful wife, Jennifer. I want to thank all the we have 2 interns who've been working all summer remotely for Chicago Tap Theater.
Amazing.
They've been doing remarkable work. I want to thank them both. That would be Emily and Allie. And I finally want to thank the dancers of Chicago Tap Theater. You guys have been amazing. It was a pleasure. We actually got to share a stage 3 weeks ago for a remote show. What a thrill to be on stage with tap dancers again. Thank you all for that. I want to remind you that Heather Cornell has her amazing program, Conversations with Heather Cornell, the Masters Manhattan Tap and Making Music Dance. Please check that out. You can go to her website, manhattantap.org/Heather Cornell Tap Dance. We will have more episodes of Tea on Tap coming up very soon. Karida, before I let you go, I want to ask the final shuffle. When you shuffle off this mortal coil, how would you most like to be remembered as a tap artist?
That I kept trying.
Beautiful. Karida, thank you so very much for your time. Thank you, not just for your time now, but thank you for all the things that I have been learning the past 3 weeks that I know I'm going to continue learning. Thanks for being a voice that the dance community desperately needs right now. We do appreciate you. I hope you know that. Thank you to all the people watching, and stay tuned for the next episode. All right, bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.